This vignette comes from Emile by Rousseau. Here's the book. And this is from book 2. And this is where the governor is teaching Emile about property. And I'm just going to read through this vignette and then maybe make a comment or two about it. So Rousseau here is giving an example of how he would teach Emile about property and how to respect property. So he starts, if therefore I had to guide one of those children I just mentioned, I would say to myself, a child does not attack persons, but things. And soon he learns by experience to respect whoever surpasses him in age and strength. So a child isn't going to pick on someone much stronger than him. But things do not defend themselves. The first idea which must be given him is therefore less that of liberty than that of property. And for him to be able to have this idea, he must have something that belongs to him. To mention to him his clothing, his furniture, his toys, is to say nothing to him, since although he disposes of these things, he knows neither why nor how he came by them. So it doesn't make sense to say, oh, that shirt you're wearing, that belongs to you. He doesn't have a sense for, at this age, the child doesn't have a sense for how that came to be his. To say to him that he has them because they were given to him is hardly to do better, for in order to give, one must have. Here is therefore a property anterior to his, and it is the principle of property one wants to explain to him, not to mention that a gift is a convention and that the child cannot know yet what convention is. So we can't talk about conventions with a young child. They don't understand what that means. Readers, in this example and in 100,000 others, I beg you to note how we stuff children's heads with words which have no meaning within their reach, and then believe we have instructed them very well. Here's just one of those beautiful lines by Rousseau where he's saying, this happens all the time. We say all these big words to children thinking they understand because we said these big important words, but it didn't mean anything to the child. The thing to do, therefore, is to go back to the origin of property, for it is there that the first idea of it ought to be born. The child living in the country will have gotten some notion of labor in the fields. For this, only eyes and leisure are necessary. He will have both. It belongs to every age, especially his, to want to create, imitate, produce, give signs of power and activity. It will not take 2 experiences of seeing a garden plowed, sowed, sprouting, and growing vegetables for him to want to garden in his turn. So there's this, a child in the country sees what happens in a garden, sees how it gets plowed, sowed, sprouting, vegetables growing, and that he wants to participate in that. We don't have to say, hey, you want to garden, don't you? It's going to come naturally. According to the principles previously established, I in no way oppose his desire. On the contrary, I encourage it. I share his taste. I work with him, not for his pleasure, but for mine. At least he believes it to be so. I become his gardener's helper. Until he has arms, I plow the earth for him. He takes possession of it by planting a bean in it. So this vignette is going to take an interesting turn. So we've prepared the land, and now Emile has planted a bean. And surely this possession is more sacred and more respectable than that taken of South America when Nunez Balboa, in the name of the King of Spain, planted his standard on the shore of the South Sea. So he's just saying, this is a significant moment that he's planting this bean, and this is a treasure for the child. We come every day to water the beans. With transports of joy, we see them sprout. I increase this joy by saying to him, this belongs to you. And then explaining to him the term belong. I make him feel that he has put his time, his labor, his effort, finally his person there, that there is in this earth something of himself that he can claim against anyone, whomsoever, just as he could withdraw his arm from the hand of another man who wanted to hold on to it in spite of him. One fine day, he arrives eagerly with the watering can in his hand. So we've seen this bean sprout, and he's come every day to water it. And now we're coming this one fine day, and oh, what a sight! Oh, pain! All the beans are rooted out. The plot is torn up. The very spot is not to be recognized. Oh, what has become of my labor, my product, the sweet fruit of my care and my sweat? Who has stolen my goods? Who took my beans from me? This young heart is aroused. The first sentiment of injustice comes to shed its sad bitterness in it. Tears flow in streams. The grieving child fills the air with moans and cries. I partake of his pain, his indignation. We look, we investigate, we make searches. Finally, we discover that the gardener did the deed. He is summoned. So now they see these beans that have sprouted that were theirs because they had watered them and planted and watered them and watched over them, and someone has plowed over them, and they see, oh, it's this gardener. So they call the gardener, but we certainly do not get what we expect. The gardener, learning what we are complaining about, begins to complain more loudly than we do. What, sirs, says the gardener, is it you who have thus ruined my work? I had sowed Maltese melons there, the seeds of which had been given me as a treasure, and with which I hoped to regale you when they were ripe. So now it's changed, and the student is in a position, Emile is in a position where he can appreciate what this gardener is saying. But now, in order to plant your miserable beans there, you destroyed my melons for me when they were already sprouting, and they can never be replaced. You have done me an irreparable wrong, and you have deprived yourselves of the pleasure of eating exquisite melons. And now here's a dialogue. So Rousseau says, excuse us, my poor Robert. You had put your labor, your effort there. I see clearly that we did wrong in ruining your work. But we will have other Maltese seeds sent to you, and we will never again work the land before knowing whether someone has put his hand to it before us. Now the gardener Robert responds, very well, sirs. You can then take your rest. There is hardly any fallow land left. I work what my father improved. Each in turn does the same, and all the lands you see have been occupied for a long time. And now Emile asks, Monsieur Robert, are melon seeds often lost then? And this means something more to Emile after what he's been doing with his bean seeds. Robert the gardener, pardon me, my young fellow, but little gentlemen as giddy as you do not often come our way. No one touches his neighbor's garden. Each respects the labor of others so that his own will be secure. And Emile responds, but I don't have a garden. Robert responds, the gardener, what do I care? If you ruin mine, I won't let you go around in it anymore, for you see, I don't want to waste my effort. And this should resonate with Emile at this point, right? Jean-Jacques Rousseau responds, couldn't we propose an arrangement with the good Robert? Let him grant us, my little friend and me, a corner of his garden to cultivate on the condition that he will have half the produce. The gardener, Robert, responds, I grant it to you without condition, but remember that I will go and plow up your beans if you touch my melons. So there's the vignette. In this model of the way of inculcating primary notions in children, one sees how the idea of property naturally goes back to the right of the first occupant by labor. This is Rousseau's understanding of property. That is clear, distinct, simple, and within the child's reach. From there to the right of property and to exchange, there is only a step, after which one must simply stop short. One sees further that an explanation that I enclose here in 2 pages of writing will perhaps take a year to put into practice. For in the career of moral ideas, one cannot advance too slowly, nor consolidate oneself too well at each step. Young masters, think, I beg you, about this example, and remember that in everything, your lessons ought to be more in actions than in speeches. For children easily forget what they have said and what has been said to them, but not what they have done and what has been done to them. So you can see in the example, you can appreciate if Rousseau had told Emile at the beginning, hey, this is the farmer's land, don't do anything with it, don't pick any of the plants. It wouldn't have meant anything to him, or it would have meant very little to him. After he's gone through this episode where they've raised, they've cultivated, they've cleared the little plot, they've plowed it, and they've planted the beans, and they've watched them sprout, and they've cared for them over however long, and then they're getting ready to harvest, and then they see it gone and plowed through, and then they have this so Emile at that point is going, wait a second, I did all this work and someone has destroyed it. He's furious. And then the next moment they talk with the farmer, and the roles switch, and the farmer says, wait a minute, I had done, this was my field, and you ruined my plants. I was trying to grow these melons that I was going to share with you, and now you've ruined it. And Emile, at this point, instead of feeling like he was wronged, he should appreciate that, that he can see, I did something that was offensive, and I can appreciate how it was offensive because I felt something similar when someone destroyed my work. And then Rousseau, in that dialogue with the gardener, Robert, they come up with an agreement that, well, is it okay if we use a little plot from your field, and anything we harvest will give you half? And through that arrangement, Emile is taken every step of the way where he understands there's no part where Rousseau takes him aside and says, let me tell you what property is, and let me tell you what the rights of ownership are. It's just a matter of he's walked through this experience, and by the end of it, Emile should have a very robust notion of property and the offense of violating someone's or taking from someone's property. So that is, let's vignette from book 2 in Emile about how Rousseau would teach Emile about property.